And onto the Shaman. So Shaman got a couple of interesting cards coming out of this. The first of which, and possibly the weirdest card in the set, Neptulon. 7 mana 7/7. Well, I'll be. Battle Cry. Add 4 Murlocs to your hand. Overload 3. What does Murlocs have to do with Neptulon? I know they're underwater, but that just seems. The other thing is, why do Shaman gets all the Murlocs? All of them now with Goblins and Gnomes. They have a weird undertone of Murlocs for absolutely no reason out of nowhere.
Yeah, and Murlocs doesn't really fit with Shaman that well because Shaman, that your hero power kind of forces you to play this mid-range style, whereas the Murlocs are really aggressive. Typically you've seen Murlocs played in Warlock because you play a really low
Demon
curve, you can
Murlocs.
draw more cards with life tap.
Yeah,
Um,
Demon Murlocs.
so, but Neptune is so good that this card isn't just for a Murloc deck. This card is just good on its own. So I mean, you can compare it to Ancient of Lore. Um, it's exactly the same as Ancient of Lore, except it's a 7/7 instead of a 5/5.
And it
And it is,
draws 2 extra cards.
and it draws 4 cards instead of two, but those 4 cards are crappy Murlocs. But while those 4 cards are crappy Murlocs, they're crappy Murlocs that probably synergize with each other. So you can get the War Leader, the Cold Light Seer, the Murkai, Siltfin Spirit Walker.
And Neptulon at some point. Someone is going to sap a Neptulon and they're going to replay it, and it's just going to be like, oh, I'm so far ahead. And then on turn, like 3 turns later, he's going to die to like Raider, Murkai, War Leader. He's just going to die on 1 turn.
Yeah, and I mean, so the Murlocs did used to have these big power turns where they play like a bunch of Murlocs on turn, like 6, 7, and build these incredible boards. And Neptulon allows you to do that without actually having to play shitty Murlocs in your deck. So it's a really strong card. I mean, the Overload 3 is
Quite bad.
quite a bit of an issue, but it's less of an issue in the late game than it is in the early game. Like this card, the 3 Overload on Neptulon isn't nearly as bad as the 3 Overload on Earth Elemental.
The funny thing is, in Murloc decks, I'd actually play this anyway, just as a kind of backup plan in the late game. But I actually see this being played more, well, obviously, because it'll be played more in general, because Murlocs are bad usually, in Control Shaman, because Control Shaman always had this problem where you didn't really have card draw. You had Manatite Totem, and that was pretty much it. And that was really frail, so you didn't really have card draw. The other thing is that Manatite Totem was almost actively bad sometimes against Control Warrior, because your main method of killing them was fatigue. So you'd actually draw yourself too much and just die, whereas Neptulon doesn't draw from your deck. It also means that you're not going to draw into a bunch of spells that are pretty bad in those matchups.
So the problem with Shaman against Control a lot of the time is you don't have enough minions to play. So Neptulon gives you a bunch of minions to play.
Yay!
It's really good. Whether this card will actually be played in a lot of Shaman decks depends on how slow the meta is, in large part.
I like my chances because you have a lot of extra stuff you can play early now that can kind of aggro stop, like Siege. No, not Siege Tank. Spider Tank. Wrong game. Anyway, Spider Tank, which is pretty good at aggro stops. You can also run things like the Shredder, and there's a decent amount of stuff. You've got Mace, Crackle, a couple of new cards that really help out, even a heal. So I think there's a deck there somewhere. The question is, how good is it?
Yeah, I mean, and it's probably very good.
We shall see. Also, Neptulon is hilariously good in Arena. Like, basically a War Golem that draws you 4 cards.
Yeah.
That sounds reasonably fair. It's a sprint that also is a 7/7. Put those 2 cards next to each other. But anyway, on to the other random Murloc. 4 mana, 2/5. Now, how do you pronounce this?
Siltfin.
Siltfin Spirit Walker. Okay. Whenever another friendly Murloc dies, draw a card. Overload 1. This is old Cult Master, as in 3/4 Cult Master.
Yeah, and So when Cult Master used to be a 3/4,
Busted.
it was really broken. So this is like a more survivable Cult Master from Murlocs, and turns out Cult Master and Murlocs is actually like not that bad because you spam the board with all the bad Murlocs, and
Especially
then you
one
get
that
to trade them in
lives,
for more bad
especially one that
Murlocs.
lives through all AOE ever,
Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
even Flame Strike.
Uh, you kind of have to remove this guy so that it doesn't get more draws on the next turn, but actually removing it is
Pretty
pretty
hard.
difficult. That said, it doesn't kind of get over the drawback that this card is a Murloc. You have to play Murlocs. Um, it's also kind of worse than Cult Master in a way because you don't get to draw off of all your other minions, like your totems.
Yeah, but
Um,
it's like it's kind of like an upside for Murlocs. I mean, one thing this does do in
yeah,
constructed is make Neptulon better.
yeah, absolutely. This is a really great card to get off
Imagine if
Neptune.
your Neptulon draws 7 cards.
Exactly. So this card is pretty. It's really good in Murlocs. Probably not good enough to make Murloc Shaman a
You
viable
have
deck, but
Puddle Stomper as well, which is another decent sized Murloc. So I
yeah.
think they're only missing a few more pieces at this point before there's really. They need like another tribal card in Shaman that works with it, since they're going for
I,
the Shaman thing, and then I think it'll
I
be
mean, I
pretty
think
good.
the problem with Murlocs is that like they only work if your opponent can't really respond to the early Murlocs, and then you can buff them and it gets out of control. But if your opponent can deal with that stuff, then you just end up with a handful of useless Murlocs. And there's already much better cards that snowball out of control if your opponent can't deal with them, like Undertaker and Mech Warper, that
Yeah.
aren't awful on their own.
What
Um,
Murlocs need is they need a well, I mean, a Murloc Warper would be good, but what they need is a two
oh
mana
god,
2/2 like anthem type card, kind of like War Leader, but +1/+1. Because then you can get absolutely insane curves off, and then the explosive potential of the class, like the explosive
yeah,
potential of whatever class that in may be enough. Because then you have like, if that's in Shaman for example, you'd have Spirit Walker, Oracle, War Leader, and that card to like, that's like 8 different explosive draws you can get. So that may be enough. And that's how much you need to talk about when it comes to Murlocs, because all the low drop Murlocs are really bad, apart from Puddle
yeah.
Stomper. Like
They
they're
just need to be like
horrible.
a Murloc haunted creeper. That would be what would.
True. You also have Tidecaller. Tidecaller is a good card in Murloc. The problem is you have to play Murlocs with it. Like
Yeah.
if Tidecaller just said minions, it'd be broken.
Um,
It'd be so busted. But yeah, so there's a couple good cards in Murlocs. Problems you have to play all the bad ones as well. So eventually, maybe you'll get enough Murlocs you don't have to play all the bad ones, and it'll probably be good at that point. But anyway, Dune Shaman, forming a 5/4 Wind Fury, Overload, 1. With the Ogre effect, I have played this in Arena several times. It has been very, very good in that, although there was a time where it just refused to hit anything useful. But it's very good in Arena. I don't like this in Constructed. In fact, I hate this in Constructed.
yeah. So when you play this card, the dream with this card is that um sometimes you'll play it and then when you have board control and then they won't be able to deal with it, and you can hit their face for 10. Um, but sometimes they'll just trade up a smaller minion into it because it's a 5/4. Sometimes they'll kill it with a True Silver Champion or a Death Bite.
Sometimes it will
Sometimes,
completely miss.
they'll look at their hand, they'll realize they have no answer to the Dune Shaman. They'll play their piloted Shredder, and then it'll try and hit their face, but it'll just go into the
Aww.
Shredder and get shredded.
It's okay, it has Wind Fury. If you miss the Shredder the first time, you can hit it the second time.
Yeah.
It's actually kind
Um,
of weird that the Wind Fury and the Ogre effect are on the same card. It's like added
so
RNG.
yeah, this card's like an interesting card, but the chances of getting the really good value out of it are pretty low.
Yeah.
The overload is pretty annoying.
The Overload just seems like overkill.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I
I
don't
think.
even know if it was needed.
I mean, it does buff out your Unbound Elemental, which is like
Whoa.
pretty nice combo, but
Ogre,
I don't
I
think this card
mean,
is that great.
the Ogres aren't fantastic. I think the Rogue one is Fringe, and the 3 and a 4/4 is Fringe, but I don't think the rest of them are even close.
Yeah, I don't think
Um,
it's this guy.
like, it's a pretty big drawback. Anyway, speaking of pretty big drawbacks, Ancestral's Call. 4 mana epic. Now, it's an epic, therefore it must be bad. And this actually sets the trend for it. Put a random minion from both players' hands onto the battlefield. Now, before anyone's like, oh my god, this is so crazy, and you just hex whatever they play and it's fine. Okay, I just want to just put something out here. Alright, so, you play Ancestral's Call, 1 card. And hex, 2 cards. And you put something down from your hand, 3. So, you played 3 cards, and you gave them a drop for free with 0 mana invested whatsoever, and you spent 7. So, they get a drop for free. So far, you've just... And then if they hex, or they just remove your guy you spent all this time putting down, you just 2 for 3'd yourself, and gave them a bunch of mana.
Yeah, right.
Like,
So suppose that you play Ancestor's Call, and maybe you get like a Ysera or a Ragnaros.
oh my
You've gained like
god.
4 or 5 mana, but your opponent also gains like 4 or 5 mana because they might get like a Yeti.
And card advantage.
Yeah, and you spent a card to do that. And that's the dream scenario where you get out your big late game guy. And it's
Yeah.
kind of cool. You can play all your small stuff first, and then play it and
What's
get out the.
what's kind of amusing is there are people using the argument against Hunter and like Zoo. It's good because you won't get anything good. However, you realize this is on turn 4. The only thing left in their hand are like Highmane and Doomguard.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like
So I mean, this card is like the place that you play this card is in like some kind of niche combo thing where you play like a bunch of late game stuff to specifically combo with this. But when you get it off, it's not good enough to justify having a handful of your Sarahs on turn 4 when you don't have
and then
Ancestors
when you
Call.
don't draw it, it's horrible.
There's like kind of cool combos where you can play like Ancestors Call and then Malagos with a bunch of like cheap damage spells
Yay.
and OTK them, which is like all right, but then maybe you should just take out the Ancestors Call and Malagos part of your deck and
Just run
just put in
OTK
minions
with
that deal
Doomhammer.
damage to their face and then use the burn on their face anyway and win.
Yep. And just use
Um,
Doomhammer instead of Malagos.
yeah, exactly. So this card is interesting and flashy and like the
Terrible.
effect is so interesting that maybe in the future there will be some way to use this card.
If this card is ever good, then that is not a metagame I want to play in. I'll put it
Yeah.
that way. For the same
But
reason, if Tree of Life is good, that's not a metagame I want to play in. If Restoring to 30 is a good effect, I do not want to play in that game because that's degenerate.
um, yeah. So yeah, Ancestors Call is pretty bad. You won't see it constructed.
Although I will say, Tree of Life will screw you over from time to time, Ancestral Skull probably won't. Because every so often, Tree of Life will do something crazy. Ancestral Skull also does something crazy every so often. But at this point, we're like, it's kind of like looking at the Alarma Vault of the set compared to like another weird rare. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we're at that level. Anyway, something that is not at that level is Power Mace. 3 mana,
Oh,
3/2, Death Rattle. Give a random friendly mech +2/+2. This is arguably one of the best weapons in the entire game. If you're playing a mech deck, this is the best weapon in the game. It's disgusting in a mech deck.
this card is really excellent. So you can think about it like so it's basically like a 3 mana Fiery War Axe.
Compare it to
Which
Cockhammer. They're in the same set.
which in its so yeah, the difference between having 2 attack on a weapon and 3 attack is really really important. So because so many early game drops have 3 health and you can play this and just kill them. You can a 3 mana Fiery War Axe on its own is so good that
Hunter
back in the days of like the old mid-range hunter that wasn't running any traps, some people were actually playing Eaglehorn Bow in that deck
yeah.
just because a 3 mana Fiery War Axe was worth it. But this isn't just a 3 mana Fiery War Axe. It's a 3 mana Fiery War Axe that on the turn after a random friendly mech gets +2/+2.
That's a ridiculous effect, by the way.
Which is a really strong buff. It's not as strong as most buffs because usually what will happen is you play the Power Mace, you'll swing at something, and the next turn you'll play a mech and buff it, so it doesn't get charged most of the time, unlike a lot of other buffs. But The benefit is that you don't have to stick anything on the board to play it. This is the reason that you'll try and put mechs into your Shaman deck, and then you'll cry because there's so many good Shaman cards, and it's really difficult to fit enough mechs in. But
It's a bit like building a priest deck at the moment.
yeah. Harvest Golem was already good in Shaman. Piloted Shredder is really good in Shaman. And
I will say Power Mace into Piloted Shredder is just that should be illegal.
yeah, it makes
That
Harvest Golem into a Yeti.
it turns Piloted Shredder into Piloted Sky Golem. Actually, no, it's bigger.
Yeah.
It's straight up bigger. Like that's absolutely crazy. But the other thing is, it this is something which Shaman, if you have a Shaman mech deck, there's something which is a big advantage. I'm not sure if it's big enough to compensate for some of the other weaknesses, but big advantage for Shaman is that if you play Mech Warper on turn 1, they cannot, as in it just does not work if they play another Mech Warper to try and keep on tempo, because if they have to decide, or if they just don't have a way of killing your Mech Warper, you're playing Shaman. If you don't have a way of killing that Mech Warper, you drew really badly.
Right.
Because they have 15 ways of doing it now. And
The nice thing about
Power
the nice thing about Power Mace is it's not very demanding in terms of your deck. Like, because it's not the worst thing if you don't get the buff. It's still a 3-mana Fire Aurorax, which is fine. You don't have to go so committed to the mechs, so you might not even see mech, but you might just see like a bunch of the standard good body mechs.
Whirling Zap-o-matic. That sounds fair.
And it'd be fine, yeah. There also might be like a more aggressive Shaman with like proper mechs and
Whirling Zap-o-matic, Spider Tanks. You can build a decent one.
I think Harvest Golem definitely has the edge over Spider Tank and Shaman if you only run one of the two.
Because Flame Tongue?
But yeah, because of Flame Tongue. And just because Shaman benefits from having that stickiness on the board.
It's really bad against Priest though, because they don't even need the Shrinkmeister.
That's really true, and the Ascendancy of Priest is one huge problem for Shaman in this set, because that's typically one of the worst matchups in the game.
Yeah. Although if they run completely differently, like if they're running a more aggressive strategy, you may be able to pull it off, because like a Power Mace buff on a mech, that is not dying to anything barring Shadow or Death.
It's also worth noting that Power Mace is extremely good against Priest.
Kills 3/2s? I mean, it kills everything, actually.
Yeah, one of the reasons that like Eagle and Bow and Hunter is really good against Priest, because you get to kill their clerics and
help kill their
zombie chows and injured blade masters and their mech warpers and shadow boxes, and
it kills a lot of stuff. The other thing is Power Mace will often actually, you'll play it, it'll kill a 2-drop, and then it will help kill their 3-drop and buff your 4-drop. That's not going to be uncommon.
Yeah, really strong card.
Yeah, very strong card. One of the best Shaman cards, if not the best one. Crackle, 2 mana. Deal 3 to 6 damage, overload 1. So this is basically where they kind of put 2 lightning bolts together, but the process didn't work very well, so it kind of only does it randomly. This card is actually pretty good, I think.
This card is amazing.
The question is it better? I think it is, but is it better than Lightning Bolt?
So you can compare this card to piloted. Not pilot. What am I talking about? You compare this card to Lava Burst. Hey, it's an easy slip of the tongue to make. I'm sure you've confused those two cards before. So for Lava Burst, you get 5 damage for 3 mana and 2 overload. This Crackle, you get 4.5, an average of 4.5 damage for 2 mana and 1 overload. The RNG on this card is horrendous. Sometimes you're just gonna have to aim this card at something and know you're gonna lose if it doesn't kill it. But Crackle is really strong.
If you're playing it instead of Lightning Bolt, though, it's not even a compromise, because I've got a feeling killing 1-drops won't be as essential, because you'll be running Rock Batter, because you'll have a bunch of extra stuff anyway, and you'll be running Earth Shocks. So the 1-drop is fairly covered, and you can use Crackle to kill 2-drops anyway, because if you're going first, even if they coin it, it kills it. So Crackle fills a similar role it's not as good on the curve, but then it has this like upside where most likely you'll kill something that has 4 life. Like you have to get very
Right.
unlucky. Think about it this way: people YOLO storm a lot, like between 2 and 3. You don't like doing it, but you do it sometimes. And if you're prepared to take a risk of 50-50, taking a risk of 75 to 25% failure rate on 4 damage for 2 mana is actually pretty good.
Yeah, and also you're a shaman, so you might have some like
Spellpower
a
totem.
searing totem or some haunted creeper bits and pieces on the board, or like back half of a harvest golem, so that even if you miss, it's not the worst thing in the world because you can just kind of make up the damage.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there's a couple of ways that you can use this. So yeah, you could replace lightning bolt in like slower shaman decks, and a lot of control shaman decks had like tried to cut lightning bolt because having so many 1 mana spells is a bit awkward, and lightning bolt's really awkward in the early game anyway, especially for your first because they
Literally
play an
does nothing.
undertaker on their turn 1, and then on your turn 2 you have to lightning bolt it, which means you don't do anything else on that turn, and then you screw over your next turn as well. Um,
Crackle does the same thing there,
and
but
yeah,
you get a good
in that
upside.
circumstance, Crackle is the same. Um, so this might replace lightning bolt in those decks. It also means that Shaman now has such a high critical mass of burn cards
You can
that
actually make a burn deck.
you could just see it like face Shaman deck
You
just
can
with
make
all
Power
of the
Mace.
burn.
Power Mace goes in that deck.
Yeah,
6 damage for 3 mana. I'll take it.
yeah. Shaman does also get some other good aggressive cards, like the one we're going to talk about next.
Yeah. Alright.
So there's definitely going to be an aggressive Shaman deck,
Yeah.
where you see, if things get greedy enough, that Shaman might just be going to
Shaman
the
is
face.
also insane in Arena at the moment. Like, Power Mace good, Crackle good. Next card we're going to talk about is also very good in that format, and the Doom Wall Shaman is good. Got a
Actually,
bunch of
before we
boosts
move
to
on, I just
Arena.
wanted to return to Power Mace for a second,
Go for it.
because one drawback that I did forget to mention is that so Shaman currently has Stormforged Axe, which is a reasonably good weapon that in other classes might see play, but one of the main reasons that you don't see Stormforged Axe is because Doomhammer is one of the best cards in the game.
Yeah, but it also sticks around for ages.
Yeah, that's true, right? So every Shaman weapon has to have the inherent drawback that if you draw after draw your Doomhammer, um, it's really useless. But
True.
Power Mace is a lot better than Stormforged Axe. It's not gonna stick around so long, so it's less likely to conflict with the Doomhammer.
You can also like play it. This is a little known interaction that a lot of people don't know because it doesn't come up very often because Stormforged Axe isn't played very much. But you can actually play Power Mace on 4, attack, and then play it on, and then you can Doomhammer on 5 and attack with Power Mace, play Doomhammer, and get another attack in. Because the Wind Fury
Right.
works on total number of attacks in the turn, not total number of attacks with
Yeah, it
Doomhammer.
gives your hero Wind Fury, so your hero can attack twice.
Yeah, it's a weird interaction which doesn't come up very often because Shaman doesn't usually use very many weapons.
Yeah.
But
Um.
it does work that way.
Okay. So
Alright, on to arguably the best of the 2-drop mechs in Arena, that's for sure. It's ridiculous in Arena. Whirling Zap-o-matic, 2 mana 3/2 mech with Wind Fury at common. Now, Zimwana called this, yes, when this was spoiled, he's like, haha, I called it. I'm like, yeah, okay. But, I played with this in Arena. It's been either good, or if they don't have their 2-drop, it does 12 damage. So that's a thing. But in Constructed, this just feels like the ultimate Punisher for any slow deck.
yeah. So if you can't kill this card, you're gonna take a lot of damage. There's the dream scenario where you coin out
Zap-o-matic into Flame Tongue.
Zap-o-matic, and you play another Zap-o-matic, and then you play like Flame Tongue and Rock Biter and do like
Oh.
um you,
And
you can kill them on turn 3 really easily.
yeah, you can. There's
Um
there's a lot of turn 3 kills possible with Dragonhawk, and you can do similar things with Zap-o-matic.
yeah, except it's not a terrible card.
Yeah, that's
Um
true.
well, the downside is it comes on a 3/2 body.
It's not that much of a
And if
downside.
you've ever had your knife juggler backstabbed or war axed, you will know that having a 2 mana 3/2 is makes you quite vulnerable to.
I will say though
Uh,
that 3/2 has become better because a lot of the good weapons are now 3/2 as opposed to 2/3, and not to mention a lot of the 2-drops are 2/3s now, and you have to kill them. So, I mean, obviously
Yeah.
it's in Shaman, so that's a bit of a moot point, because it goes into the pile of cards that kill 2/3s, but, like, it has got to the point when Shaman could literally lend several of them to Paladin and they wouldn't notice. It just has got to that point. You've got Rockbiter, Power Mace, Crackle, Lightning Bolt, Zap-o-matic, like, Flame Tongue Totem on 1-drops. It's just
Um,
ridiculous. Like,
so
there's so many ways of doing
and
it.
yeah, so this card's going to see you playing the aggressive shaman that tries to punish your opponent for not being able to deal with it by putting huge amounts of damage into their face. The Wind Fury means it's an activator for Rockbiter to make that into 6 damage to the face.
One of the biggest incentives to run mech is actually in Shaman. Both of their mech cards are really good.
Yeah, so yeah, because the mech is kind of awkward in Shaman, but because the mech cards are so good that yeah, you want to play Zap-o-matic just so that you can get the value off of Power Mace. It's really strong.
Yep. Alright, last Shaman card. An interesting one. Vitality Totem. 2 mana, 0/3, rare. At the end of your turn, restore 4 health to your hero. Now, I can actually... this is why I was thinking of Anti-Kyobot versus Vitality Totem. Because Shaman is probably going to need some healing in certain metagames. If the metagame is fast enough, it's going to need some healing. That's just a fact. Because Shaman's main problem is you stabilize and you die from burn spells. So you need some healing. Question is, which one is better? A one of Vitality Totem or one of Anti-Healbot? And before anyone says, oh, the Ring Farseer, that has been historically proven to not be enough on its own.
Right. So yeah, I mean, the problem that you have is against the hunter, you stabilize around turn 5, and then you die to a kill command, lightning, and the hero power.
You just die before you can kill him, basically.
Yeah, and so having some way of healing is probably quite good in Shaman. We already talked about that thing that happens against Warrior, where like they Alexstrasza you, and you have the efficient answers to all of their threats, but eventually you just die to a weapon and Grommash.
For what it's worth, Vitality Totem is better against Warrior because they
Yeah,
have
Vitality.
so many problems killing totems late in game.
Yeah, and so you can kind of snowball this card. At the very minimum, it's like basically restore 7 health to your hero,
Usually, yeah.
because they can't ignore it. Obviously, they have
Unless
to
they
attack it.
silence it, but then you still have Flame Tongues. So it
Yeah.
still works.
The problem with this card is it's extremely poor. Like it doesn't have very much impact, as it's a 0/3. So like against a zoo, you're going to drop this card. It's going to restore 40, and it's going to die immediately.
Hey, like this is the debate
And
here: is Shaman's gonna need one? So it's like, and the pros and cons of both is Vitality Totem costs less, is better in control matchups because it's repetitive, and it basically means you win every fatigue war ever created because you just heal every turn. And the downside is that Anti-Healbot, while it costs more, you also get a 3/3 and it burst heals more efficiently. Like, it's better at stopping them from just killing you on that turn because it'll heal for 8 and then probably trade with the threat.
yeah, like the fact that when you play this card, you don't do anything on the board is pretty
Pretty bad.
bad. I kind of instinctively don't like this card, but maybe it will be good.
I'm going to try both because I've been playing Shaman Control so much, it's just ridiculous. So I'm going to try Vitality Totem and Anti-Healbot. I think if you're running a more aggressive, like when I say aggressive, I mean like mid-rangey strategy, Healbot's better. But if you're running like a super late game, I've got a feeling Vitality is better, but it's difficult to judge right now. It needs testing.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's pretty much it for the Shaman cards. So Shaman had one of the most interesting sets of cards. We got the weirdest legendary in the set. We got the worst epic in the set, arguably. That's an achievement. That's an achievement.
No,
There's
I
some bad
definitely think
epics
Tree of
here.
Life is worse.
I think you might be right there, but it's really close. we need a. I should make a poll of like what's the worst epic in the set, and then put it in the comments or something. People can vote on it. But anyway, so that's pretty much it for the Shaman. We will see you in the next part.